Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. The Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 7th of December 2024. It's a belated one today, sorry. And it's not self-inflicted. I am rough as a badger's arse this morning. Killer sore throat, really struggling. I said last night I felt like I had a sore throat in my live stream and it was coming on. And I was joking that I needed some wine to soothe it, but genuinely feeling rough today. And that with multiple sclerosis, as I have, as many of you know, primary progressive multiple sclerosis, that messes with my MS and my whole body is like, Anyway, so you don't really need to know, but that's why I'm a little bit later today. Apologies. It's a very windy, stormy. There's a massive storm in the UK. Saturday morning, my boys' football wasn't on, so I thought, lie in and then get to my videos, and then I just haven't had the energy to do so until now. But anyway, here we are. Go and check my live stream last night. Really loved that. Love hanging out with you guys. And it was fantastic. Really, loads of information as normal and interesting discussion, in my humble opinion, of course. Right, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. 1,300 personnel lost. That is a massive decrease from the... I mean, it's a huge number still. It's at the very top of the what I thought was a very high range. The history of this is we were amazed when it got over 1,000. 1,000 was like an absolutely insane number. And then we started getting numbers up to sort of 1,300. So I was saying, right, this is your really high range, 1,000 to 1,300. If you get to 1,300, that's super high. Then we started getting 1,700 and something, and in the 1,600s and 500s for the last few weeks. It's been incredible. So to have it drop back down to 1,300, though that's a sort of drop of maybe 350 odd or 300 on average over the last few weeks or so, that is still an insanely high number, 1,300. So, goodness me. No tanks. That fits in with a drop in the personnel numbers. 17 troop carrying AFVs is just below the daily average, and 12 artillery systems is somewhat below the daily average. So, a drop across all the categories. No special equipment, no MLRS, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. Very good there. Be interested to know what they are. And 49 vehicles and fuel tanks. Just everything is lower, pretty much, apart from the anti-aircraft warfare systems. So maybe that is signifying a lack of activity due to, who knows, weather could have been different yesterday, or we could start to see, I don't know, this is a bit of hope from me, a bit of hopium. It could be that the Russians are struggling to be able to commit the forces they have consistently been committing to the front lines in terms of meat assaults and mechanized attacks and whatnot. At some point, they can't keep doing that ad infinitum, right? So at some point, they will culminate. And you were expecting them to culminate over the winter period. Well, we are now in the winter period. But having looked at previous years' stats, actually, the personnel losses have gone up during the winter period. So who knows? Who knows? Just pure speculation on my part. Right, one of Ukraine's foremost journalists has said the country has lost over 100,000 soldiers. So Yuri Butasov, the general staff, said the general staff had told him that 70,000 defenders have been killed, another 35,000 missing. Missing, I mean, A, is this true? B, missing, is it, I wonder, with regard to both armies actually, how many deserters are in the missing? We have heard that Ukraine has suffered hugely with deserters. So with the missing, is that a case of people who have done a runner and they're now living in Georgia or Eastern Europe or something? Or is that missing, as in presumed dead, on the battlefield somewhere, haven't been able to recover their body? But also, how true is this? Now, Yuri Butasov is someone who is pretty reliable. He's not like a doomer, but he will say negative things when he sees them. He calls them when he sees them. So I would take that claim fairly seriously, and that shows that, I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. You would expect Ukraine to have lost that many soldiers, personally. I think you'd be living in a kind of, again, a informational space hopium if you thought that they had lost significantly less than that. This is 3 years of war, and the Russians have been beating back the Ukrainians since the counteroffensive ended, the 2023 counteroffensive. The Ukrainians will have lost a phenomenal amount of people, but of course the question is how many more have the Russians lost? And when we look at the stats here, we see 751,910. I'm guessing that their losses are going to be somewhere between 150 and 200,000 in terms of dead. That's my guess. And then that puts the figures here into perspective. So it's going to be something like 2 to 2.5 times the losses that the Ukrainians have incurred, which is not enough in personnel terms. You would like that to be 5 to 1 or 100 to 1, right? But 2 to 2.5 to 1 is certainly better. They are doing a good job comparatively speaking, or the Russians are doing a bad job of attacking with scant regard for their own human lives. But right, Ukrainian drone strike has marked the first confirmed destruction of a North Korean military vehicle supporting Russian forces in Ukraine. In Ukraine's Kharkiv Oblast. So Kharkiv, interesting. So what does the Euromaidan press here say? Ukrainian drone operators targeted a North Korean anti-tank missile vehicle. So that's going to be the Bullseye 4, I would have thought, for the first time, marking a critical moment in the war's evolving dynamics. According to Forbes on the 5th of December, the Vitrolom drone group, part of the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade, tracked and destroyed a Bullseye 4 six-wheeled vehicle in Kharkiv. So the important point here is that's not in Kursk, where the North Koreans are supposed to be. That is in Kharkiv, with a second drone witnessing the strike that apparently detonated some of the vehicle's 8 anti-tank missiles. North Korean military equipment has become increasingly crucial to Russia's war effort. North Korea supplies Russia with artillery, rounds, missiles, and thousands of troops to aid Russia in the war against Ukraine. Russia has assembled 50,000 troops in the Kursk Oblast, including North Korean soldiers in Russian uniforms, for an imminent offensive. The North Koreans have deployed multiple weapon systems to the front lines, including an unspecified number of these Bullseye 4 vehicles. As I mentioned before, a little bit like the Avenger Humvee with... Well, actually, Avenger's got manpads on top, so the Humvee with the manpads on top, the Stingers effectively are shooting down aircraft. These Bullseye 4 have anti-tank guided missiles, sort of Javelin type thing, although probably not as good, loaded on top of this six-wheeler. So it's sort of an APC with anti-tank guided missiles. They provided those, dozens of M1989 howitzers and M1991 rocket launchers, alongside thousands of infantry troops. The Institute for the Study of War reports that the Russian forces are experiencing significant casualties, losing 1,200 to 2,000 troops and up to 100 vehicles daily. The cumulative losses over 33 months potentially exceed 730,000 killed and wounded personnel and 15,000 pieces of heavy equipment, which is broadly in line with the Ukrainian General Staff figures there, just a little bit less than what they have claimed. Now, moving on, a Ukrainian drone with an installed net launcher intercepts a Russian Mavic drone with bombs. So here it is dropping the net, and we've seen this a number of times. Russians had actually got a head start on these net drones, so that then leads the drone to fall to the ground and catastrophically explode with those munitions on board. Worth seeing there. Now, somebody on who's this, we have Guy Spearing, thank you Guy, is giving a little bit more information about the ambush that I reported yesterday. I think it was yesterday, where I was saying I think in the Kursk region they fooled some Russians into attacking a certain area and then basically ambushed them and killed a bunch of them and took prisoners as well. And the initial reports were using Russian POWs. And I was saying, I don't know what this really means. Hope it doesn't mean some kind of perfidy or improper use of POWs. And Guy here says, Jonathan, minute 10:01, you talk about the Ukrainian ambush scarecrows using Russian POWs. The first phase was the previous day when the Ukrainian armed forces stormed Russian trenches in the Kursk salient, killing several and taking prisoners. I believe you reported on this and showed a group of Russian POWs with their heads covered. Intelligence gleaned from these men, so this was the using of Russian POWs. Intelligence gleaned from these men revealed that this group was due to meet a reinforcement party of 20 Russian Marines the next day. Seizing the opportunity, the Ukrainians duped the Russians in a radio game and, posing as the group that had already been overrun, said everything was okay for the rendezvous, so go ahead. It was a beautiful trap. The 20 Marines went straight into the prepared killing zone and were annihilated. This illustrates one advantage that the Ukrainians have over the Russians: language. Most Ukrainians speak fluent Russian and can easily pass themselves off as occupiers. However, only a few of the Russians in the war know any Ukrainian, with the possible exception of the men from the fairy tale DPR and LPR. So it's impossible for them to pull off the same stunt like this against the Ukrainian armed forces. Fascinating insight. Thank you, Guy. Really, really appreciate that for some further information on that. So the using of the POWs was completely normal, which is basically getting some intel out of them and then utilizing that intel to ambush the Russians. Good stuff there. Okay, Russian strikes last night were much less than we have seen. So on to distant strikes. Tim White says Russia launched just 14 attack drones overnight. 7 were shot down. 6 were stopped by electronic warfare, and the other one returned to the sender, to Russia. So that was 14 out of the 14 taken out in some way. Now, Anton Gerashenko says sanctions are working. Russian strike drones are more likely to go off course after replacing servo motors with Chinese ones, according to the Washington Post. So sources from the publication note that technical issues with the Iranian-made Shahed 136 drones assembled in Russia, which the Russians call Garan 2, have been observed this year. During sharp turns, they lose control, some crash, while others stabilize but become easy targets for Ukrainian air defense. Experts from the RUSI, Royal United Services Institute, suggest that the likely cause is a replacement of the servo motor, which helps regulate drone movements in flight. At the end of 2023, due to difficulties obtaining components amid sanctions, Russians began using Chinese servo motors instead of those manufactured in South Korea. Brilliant. If that is true, that is fantastic. Exactly what we want from these sanctions being implemented. Now, good news for the Ukrainians, although I normally report this and will do in the military aid section, is pertinent to the shooting down of drones. Here's some good news for a Saturday morning, says Tim White. More F-16s are in Ukraine thanks to Denmark. These are used more in a defensive capacity than to attack for the time being. So Zelensky last night this morning, stated the second batch of F-16s from Denmark has arrived in Ukraine. This is an example of leadership in defending lives that sets Denmark apart. So he's giving Denmark some heaps of praise here, and for good reason. So they are supporting Ukraine well beyond what other countries are in terms of percentage of GDP, in terms of really significant aid, but also since they've kind of maxed out their defense industry, they are just directly investing in the Ukrainian defense sector. So he continues, Zelensky, the aircraft in the first batch provided by the Danish people are already intercepting Russian missiles, saving our people's lives and our infrastructure. Now, our air shield has been further strengthened. If all partners were as determined as Denmark, Russian terror could already have been made impossible. I'm heartfeltly grateful to Mette. So Mette Frederiksen, she is the Prime Minister of Denmark, her team, and the entire Danish nation. Honestly, brilliant. The Danes are awesome, and Zelensky really recognises this and says, look, if everyone was working in the same way as the Danes, we would have put paid to the Russian attacks. During the night, Russia hit Sumy region with a ballistic missile. So infrastructure in Konotop was struck, but the local authorities underplaying the attack with no injuries reported. And it's been confirmed. So that was last night. Then yesterday evening, in fact, before I did my live, we heard that Kryvyi and Zaporizhzhia had been struck. Zaporizhzhia with guided glide bombs. Kryvyi, not sure actually. Don't know. Anyway, it's been confirmed a third body has been recovered from the ruins in Kryvyi. Russia hit the city last night. A day of mourning will be observed in Kryvyi on Monday. So there's some pretty horrible scenes in Kryvyi and then Zaporizhzhia. So Russia's killed more civilians today. So this is yesterday. Another attack on Kryvyi. Sorry, this is Kryvyi. But first news is coming in of an aerial bomb hitting Zaporizhzhia. Yeah, so the footage here is from Zaporizhzhia. But a petrol gas station is on fire, and passers-by are rescuing people from their burning cars. At least 2 people have been injured. No, in fact, I think about 10 people died in the end. It was horrific. So people literally burning in the cars, horrible stuff. Tonight, Russia just dropped an air bomb on a car repair service in Zaporizhzhia. At least 9 civilians killed, at least 17 injured as of now. Just a murder for the sake of murder, says Ilya Ponomarenko later. A number of wounded in Zaporizhzhia rose to 20, according to the head of the Regional Military Administration, Fedorov. A 4-month-old girl is amongst the injured. And then today, you can see what was left of this area. Russia killed 2 children in Zaporizhzhia. Amongst the dead, there are 2 children. This is updated data. Identification of victims of the airstrike continues. The enemy struck where the people were just returning home on Friday evening. So it looks like, I don't know whether it's a petrol station or some kind of car repair facility or both. But the devastation is pretty bad there, and a number of people dying, pretty horrific. On the other hand, the Ukrainians have been hitting targets in Russia overnight. Several explosions were reported over Mykop, Adygea in Russia. Preliminary reports suggest air defense systems were active in the area. Residents heard at least 2 loud blasts near the local airfield. No air raid alert or official statements have been issued yet. When there's no air raid alert, you hope that actually that's the explosions then were missiles that just got through. They were only detected last minute, but they might be shot down by air defense, but they weren't expecting attacks, and that's usually good news for the Ukrainians. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other information there. Then this is what a lot of people are talking about this morning. Ukrainian Navy struck Russian-occupied gas platforms in the Black Sea using naval and aerial drones. Footage shows drones targeting observation points of the Russian military. Yesterday, Russia's defense ministry claimed 6 naval drones were destroyed. Now, what happened here, by all accounts, is that the Ukrainians sent the USVs, unmanned surface vehicles, so like the Magura V5 or whatever one it was, although I think there's claims that these are new ones. And then from them, they had aerial drones, so UAVs, take off and use the USVs as repeaters. So the Ukrainian Navy unmanned attack boats have gained a significant upgrade and are now able to serve as drone motherships. Last night, Ukrainian USVs carrying FPV drones attacked Russian-controlled gas platforms on the Black Sea, heavily damaging several. Here's a source from Facebook. The hunt for the enemy in the Black Sea continues. Naval drones of the Navy unit carried out targeted strikes on Russian targets. Enemy surveillance systems located on captured gas platforms off the coast of temporarily occupied Crimea were destroyed. The occupiers will not remain in our territory. We will get them everywhere. So lots of footage come from there, and a nice bit of footage as well, which is alongside one of these drones on the way to do its stuff, a dolphin jumping out of the water. So that's nice. So a new capability there from these drones, and unsurprising, we've seen these in terms of aerial drones having, aerial drones having their own sort of FPV drones flying off them, acting as motherships to these smaller drones, carrying them and then releasing them. And now we are seeing that happen at sea with the USVs carrying and releasing these FPV drones, and then it seems attacking the whole. So it looks like the aerial drones went and hit things on top of the platform to make sure that there was damage done to the observation posts and whatever else was on top, maybe even air defense. And then you had the USVs attempting to take out the structures themselves and hitting the posts. Or the foundations, if you like, but I don't know whether they are they have big enough explosives on board to do significant enough damage to make those fall down. I guess we'll have to wait to see. But there is clearly an evolution of capabilities of these drones. Now, on the night of the 5th and 6th of December, 3 drones targeted the HQ building of the Russian 3rd Motorized Division in Boguchar. So this is a couple of nights ago in the Voronezh region. So I often talk about how there are targets that are struck or at least aimed for on a nightly basis that we just don't know about. And sometimes we hear about them a few days later. Sometimes I'm sure we don't hear about them at all. and there will be a degradation of Russian, whatever it be, energy infrastructure or military capability or whatever, through every single night. I'm fairly sure there'll be things happening. So here we're hearing about a couple of nights ago that reports indicate that 2 drones hit the HQ building directly. The casualties and the damage are unknown, but you can see there that there's no roof there, and it looks like there's fire coming from within. A 3rd drone landed on a 4-story barracks roof without detonation. But yeah, other strikes do take place. Now, given that over the last, I don't know how long now, I guess, yeah, the time seems so elusive to me in trying to work out this war. How long have they been striking at oil depots and refineries? But anyway, Russian military fuel supplies face mounting pressure as strikes and sanctions impact 1/3 of processing facilities. So it's not just striking these facilities, but actually the sanctions imposed on Russia have stopped the Russians being able to pump as much out. It's very difficult because unless you've got enough demand for your product, you have essentially, there are all these different stages to the process, aren't there? There's pumping it out the ground. If we're talking about oil or gas, extracting it from the ground, and then you've got to store it, and then possibly refine it, and then store what you've refined, and then get that stuff out of the country in whatever different way. And when you have a consistent demand for that, you are extracting it at certain levels, and that actually there must be some kind of optimal level. What the Russians have struggled to do since the sanctions began at the beginning of the war is regulate the extraction. As far as I understand it, I'm no expert, but there was one stage of the war where they were having to burn off the gas at the extraction point because they had no way of storing the amount of stuff that they were getting out, and they didn't have the expertise because the services and the maintenance had also been sanctioned, and these Western countries that were previously absolutely vital part of all of these processes have pulled out of Russia, and so Russia was left with having to burn off gas because they didn't quite know what to do with it. They had no way of constraining the extraction to levels that would meet demand. And so there are all sorts of different problems that Russia faces in terms of extracting, storing, processing, and transporting all of these hydrocarbons. And all of those things together have meant, at least according to Ukrainian intelligence representative, that the fuel supplies to the Russian military are problematic. There is mounting pressure on those fuel supplies directly to the Russian military. That's exactly what we want to hear. It's like a perfect storm of issues. Good stuff there. And I'd assume fairly soon, I said this yesterday, there will be a massive wave of Ukrainian drones and missiles. We keep hearing that they're ramping up the production of X, Y, and Z, that they have these new capabilities, that different countries are providing X thousand strike drones and this and that. At some point, there will have to be some huge strikes on Russian targets. But I guess we'll just have to wait for that. Right, on to other bits and pieces. We have Fitch ratings. Expects the war will continue into 2025 within its current broad parameters. This is interesting. So taking into account what they think, what Fitch think in their ratings concerning the new administration coming in, whether Russia are going to come to the negotiating table, whether Ukraine are going to come to the negotiating table, and then how long that's going to last, etc., etc. So, a new administration's stated policy objective, says Max24, to end the war could lead to a negotiated ceasefire, but a peace agreement is unlikely due to difficult concessions that would be required from both sides. Yes, so they are thinking actually it could go on for a little bit longer than some people might be hoping. War translated, Dmitry says, by the way, an interesting piece of news came out recently. Putin appointed a certain Mr. Hingstein Hingstein as the governor of the Kursk region. This Hingstein is a long-standing, highly controversial figure in Putin's establishment, known for his work in journalism as well as lewd scandals. Hingstein is the perfect politician of the Putin era, just like Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov, and Nebenzia. So Nebenzia is the UN guy, the bald guy in the UN that spouts Russian narrative. And then, of course, Sergei Lavrov is the foreign minister. He's one of these sorts of figures. He curries favour with his patron, however, has absolutely no experience in governance. And today he announced that his first priority will be to create an overview of the region's problems, which he will then proceed to address. We can see that Putin continues to strengthen his hands-on management of various crises. The Kursk region remains partially liberated by the Ukrainian armed forces, yet Hingstein has made no specific statements on this matter so far, as if the problem doesn't exist. He is a PR man, so it's likely his task will be to downplay the crisis in the region as much as possible for the Russian public, crafting a rosy narrative, just as a Kremlin butcher likes it, says Anton Geraschenko. We have it says War Translated, who then goes on to say, in some kind of anecdotal news, but it does give us a reflection of what's going on with the Russian army. A 19-year-old Russian conscript was executed in Primorsky Krai on October the 21st by a lieutenant of the 394th Motorized Rifle Regiment after refusing deployment to the Kursk region. Before his death, he endured torture, beatings and mistreatment for resisting a military contract. Sad news, for these young Russians who are being made to go to war. I don't know whether this is someone who wanted to go to war at all. I don't know the background, but he refused deployment. So obviously had some kind of idea of what was going on, and then was tortured, beaten and killed. The leaders of... Right, I wanted to just join a couple of dots here. And although this is more for the geopolitics segment, some certain things have happened, and I think, join the dots. Derek Tanis from Romania says, the leaders of various crime families and a whole myriad of TikTok influencers have supported Georgescu's presidential bid. They have now begun to flee the country. So Romania, TikTok campaign, Georgescu, ultra-nationalist eco-fascist, has had won the first round of the presidential elections. Then it was seen that there was all this Russian influence, and then the people who supported him have fled the country, obviously, under the realization they were going to be investigated, and it was all a bit dubious. Just a few days ago, Georgescu promised he would pardon all of them once he won the election. Okay, so that's happened. And then this. Private securities, some Russians pull guns on protesters in Tbilisi. Now, this is supposedly an FSB agent who has been seen in Tbilisi among the protests. You can look at him. He's pretty afraid. Like, he's being rounded on by a bunch of protesters. He's got a gun, not private security. He's already been identified as FSB. So you've got Russian FSB agents in Georgia underpinning the government there. The rigged elections that led to the Georgian Dream pro-Russian government retaining control. You've got the Russians involved in Romania. And then you have this. And this just blows my mind. So you guys and myself, we're obviously in support of free and fair elections in Romania, right? We recognise that that's super important. Russia is gaining momentum, politically speaking, in many nations in that part of the world. We've got Slovakia, we've got Hungary, we've got Serbia outside of the EU, but causing issues around there. We've got Russia trying to undermine politics in Germany and France with AfD and Rassemblement National. We've got etc., right? And then Romania. And we're thinking, yes, thankfully, the Constitutional Court overturned the elections. They're going to be run freely and fairly with an eye on what Russia is doing. And then we look here. Donald Trump Jr., wow, look at what's happening in Romania. The Constitutional Court just cancelled the first round of their presidential election. Another Soros Marxist attempt at rigging the outcomes and denying the will of the people. She's going to lose, and they know it. He's the guy, the son of the President of the United States incoming. This is who he supports. He supports Russia. He supports Russia. Republicans Against Trump said Don Trump Jr. comes in support for the far-right candidate in Romania after it was revealed that Russia ran a coordinated online campaign to help him get elected. Who could have seen this coming? We just need to be on the lookout. We need to be joining the dots, guys. Right, finally, HTS, the rebel group that has made all of these gains, or the main group that's made gains, because actually a lot of the other factions in Syria have also made gains. But the HTS says it's begun the final phase of encircling the capital Damascus as Syrian regime withdraws from the Damascus countryside. I mean, I'm half expect to see Donald Trump Jr. come out in support of Bashar al-Assad. I guess him and Tulsi Gabbard can hang out together. I could show you maps of what's going on, but it is pretty incredible what has happened in Syria. And I just want to leave you with this. This is a nice positive message and a lovely juxtaposition. Russia's first lie after they launched their full-scale invasion, back in 2022, was that Zelensky had already fled to Poland. Yet he's still in Kiev today. He's still there today. It took Bashar al-Assad less than a week to send his brothers, wife and kids to UAE and Moscow. He'll flee soon too. Well, apparently he already has. That just tells you everything you need to know. That gives you a real stark difference between those two leaders and shows you who Zelensky really is. All these people like Donald Trump Jr. who will slag off Zelensky. Joe Rogan will sit and say F Zelensky. They are not even a tenth of the man Zelensky is. Not even close. You can sit in your podcast studio and you can sit in your Trump Tower apartment, penthouse suite or whatever, slagging off Zelensky. You go and do what he did and refuse to lead the country with the Russian armed forces knocking at the door of Kiev. You go and do that. Show me what man you are. You are a tenth of the man that Zelensky is. So, Joe Rogan. So, Donald Trump Jr. How do I put this politely? As an understated phrase, just sod off. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Please press the subscribe button above if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, because I'm trying to get to that 50,139 by the 2nd of January. We can do it, guys, together. 50,139. We can do it. Speak soon.